And then based on government intervention, which things like passing of laws, things we know happen, and notable market dynamic changes, we've broken it up into 3 different epochs, so groups or periods of time. Overall, we had over 197,000 carcasses over almost 4,000 days. We're now over 4,000 days. 45 unique species. Generally speaking, rodents make up the majority of the market. Rodents, ungulates, and primates make up 90% of the market, so that's really a major chunk. Reptiles and birds, not so much. And then in terms of individual species, the blue duiker, the little forest antelope, is the #1 sold animal, and then the forest rat as well. This little guy, an adorable little guy, is #2, and then a far third and fourth are the porcupine and the red-eared monkey, which is the highest or the most widely sold monkey. And essentially what we get is this, right? We get these really big, long, spiky time series, and here you see the total. So this is the total market since 2010, the black. Red is the trap trend, and then blue is the shotgun. So this is the time series, this is just raw data. All right, and you can see at the end of Epoch 1, the market has really started to change, and the total really takes off. In Epoch 2, the shotgun and trap start to exhibit an inverse relationship. And then down here, I've broken it even further to just primates. So you can see Epoch 1, not really much is going on. Epoch 2, you've got a steady sort of increasing trend. And then Epoch 3, it starts with the passing of a primate hunting ban. Primate hunting really takes off, so that's sort of counterintuitive, all right? But what we wanted to do is pull the signal out of the noise here, right? So there's a lot going on. This is actually something I've talked to Steve about in the past. How do you pull out the actual trends from these long-term data sets? And what we did was we wanted to take out the seasonality. So we take out the noise, like I said. So we partition the data. So we take that, like if you just imagine this black line, and we break it up into 3 parts, all right? So the first is the long-term trend, right? And that's what we're focusing on. The second is the seasonality, right? So a seasonal pattern, potentially. And the last is the error, just inherent in your data collection. And like I said, we're focusing on this long-term trend. We want to know what the long-term trend of the market is. And then we average the slopes, and we normalize them, and we plot the 95% confidence interval. So what we're going to get, and I've been told by reviewers that this figure is somewhat impenetrable, so I'm trying to explain this. We're going to get this, something that looks like this. The blue square is Epoch 1, all right? The hash mark is the value, 95% confidence interval is the bar. Anything on the right is an increasing slope, anything to the left is a decreasing slope. And this is just a representation of the primates. You can see a steep increase in Epoch 3, it's a high slope, all right? And so what I want you to take home from it are a couple things. These are certain aggregations. So the island, since the end of Epoch 1, has been increasing pretty steadily. You can see here that trapping has been decreasing since the beginning of data collection, and shotgun has increased, although it hasn't changed too drastically between 2 and 3. The primates, they've got that big jump, right, after the primate hunting ban. The porcupine, the top one is porcupine, and the second is the pouch rat, which I showed you. These are typically trapped animals. They're decreasing, and the slope of their carcass rate is decreasing. So as trapping has gone down, these predominantly trapped animals are mirroring that trend. And then what's interesting here, at the top, Philantoma monticola, that's the blue duiker, the #1 selling animal in the market, and the second is the red duiker. All right. So the red duiker is a bigger forest antelope, and it doesn't do too well outside of villages. You have to go further to get it, and it's predominantly taken by shotgun. The blue duiker is trapped and shotgun, so it's taken by pretty much any means necessary. So the predominantly trapped animal shows no real increase. It's increasing, but it's pretty much just going on the same trajectory. Whereas as shotgun hunting is taken off, the red duiker, the predominantly shotgun animal, has also taken off. All right. And now, looking at the primates, you can see 5 of the 7 primates all exhibit that big jump in the Epoch 3. So after the primate hunting ban, 5 of 7 really start to go off, except the red colobus, which is this guy right here, and the putty-nosed monkey, which is this guy right here. And I don't know if you can make it out, but what we take this as is a proxy for where they're hunting on the island. The red colobus is pretty much only found in the southwest corner. This is an older map. I just did a survey here, so they're not on that southeast corner. So they're only found in this far corner, and the Nictitans, the putty nose, sorry, is only found on the southern end of the island. And essentially what that means, since they're not showing the same trend, they can't get at those monkeys, so they're not mirroring the same trend that all the other primates are showing. So we believe that that's a little glimmer of hope, that they haven't really started to overexploit those furthest areas, just on the southern end of the island, because there's no roads here, so I never mentioned that, but there's no roads. So just conclusions about that. Overall, the carcasses have increased greatly since 1997. Imports have gone up as well, so the market is also a net importer. Even though it's a small place, you can make more money if you bring in carcasses from Nigeria and Cameroon. I haven't really touched on that, but the domestic carcasses have gone up. There's been more hunters. There's more accessibility to the forest. The capture method has transitioned from trap to shotgun because it's higher profitability. You can shoot the bigger animals. You can choose which animals you shoot, and it's higher efficiency. You're not wasting animals in a trap because you're not checking it, and you can also organize, I'm going to go hunt, you come and pick up these carcasses on the side of the road tomorrow, and you can make sure you get fresh meat to the market. And then also we've seen primate carcass increases, but these two species don't show it, so we think that they're not hunting in the furthest reaches. Driving that, just coming back to that idea, is this increased demand from the urbanization and higher incomes in the capital, and the immigration of people non-native to the island with a cultural preference for bushmeat. And one thing which we're trying to get out there is this idea of a Mardi Gras mentality, in which the market players, so both consumers and suppliers, are trying to maximize their short-term gains. So the suppliers are trying to get a lot of money really quick, and the consumers are trying to eat as many of those as they can, as many of those primates as they can, before the effects of the legislation take hold, before someone actually gets in trouble for it. And what we've seen here is with the primates, right? So in 2002, there was a biodiversity roundtable. People said, don't hunt monkeys. There was no law, but they said, don't hunt monkeys, and then monkey hunting increased. The next time anybody said anything about hunting monkeys was a government passing that hunting ban. Don't hunt monkeys. Monkey hunting increases. So we're trying to get that out there, and essentially, government saying something is bad and then not following up with any enforcement is just leading to bad things in this market. So we're trying to get the government on board to try to do better, to be better and more effective with their law passing and enforcement. And the last thing I'm just going to glance over, my goal number 2, getting back to the idea of living in a tent. I've actually done a lot of surveys away from a computer and actually living in the forest. So I have 3 survey sites throughout this southern third of the island, and I've done now it's about 450 kilometers of surveys, but generally speaking, any place that there's a high level of gun hunting, there's no primates. So I'm trying to work right now to figure out this exact relationship, but close to a village, high levels of hunting, no primates. You get away from the village, there's a lot of primates, and there's a lot of different species of primates, whereas close to a village, you can only maybe see one species of primate. So we're looking at the species-specific response to hunting. Going forward, right, looking at the future, like Steve just did, I sort of see myself working on this island, ideally, in the future, and like I already mentioned, the only threat to these wildlife populations is commercial hunting. So what I'm working towards, and what the group I work with is working towards, is trying to get the government to enforce existing legislation. There's lots of laws already on the books that could stop this if they wanted to. And then we're trying to prohibit shotgun hunting, at least starting with the monkeys. You got to start somewhere, enforce the laws that you already have, and then maybe something good will come about. And the way we do that is involvement and employment of locals in research, conservation, and education. Going back to the beginning, right? Trying to start that ethos of investment in your natural resources and investment in conservation is investment in your future, an investment for the people of Equatorial Guinea, because I've gotten to really enjoy working with them. So these are some reports we've worked. This is myself teaching a class, working with a local team that we have out every month monitoring the primates, and then a number of other outreach activities, including some bushmeat micro projects and stuff like that. And lastly, I just want to thank the thing, it takes a village. There's a lot of people here at Drexel that have helped me across the way, including many people in the audience, and more people that I can list here, because working in West Africa is difficult. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
make one small comment. You would have noticed that our speakers gave you a little presentation about how they came here, or the road less traveled. And when we discussed this at lunch yesterday, I thought it would be an interesting theme for them to explore how each of them, what brought them to graduate school at Drexel working on these projects. And so they gave you a little insight into their roads. The floor is now open for questions for any one of our three speakers. Right. Yep.
I have a question for the math speakers. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name.
True. Yeah.
Is the bushmeat market driven primarily by the idea that the meat comes from an actual wild animal, or is it merely the animal that matters? I mean, if you were to say have farms where the same animals are reared for meat, would that help cut down on bushmeat from natural habitats?
I don't know. I think with the monkeys specifically, one problem is that most of those monkeys don't do well in captivity. Especially, I don't touch on it, but for reasons of their ecology, some of them die pretty quickly if you try to captive rear them. So that won't work for monkeys. In terms of the preference, I think it's more, especially with the larger monkeys, it's more of a status thing. Like in the United States, we have like the big Christmas goose or the Thanksgiving turkey.
Right.
Buying a monkey is more so, I can afford to buy a monkey than look at this delicious meal that we put on the table.
Has the market evolved to the point where they distinguish between monkeys, or is it just monkey meat as opposed to say?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it doesn't come like packaged. It's just an animal laying on the table, so that people know like, oh, that's the black colobus. That one eats leaves. That one doesn't taste very good. But that's the drill. That one eats figs all the time, so that one tastes very good. There's definitely a preference for specific species. Where that comes from, other than the fact that two of them are leaf-eating monkeys, and like we have deer, you got to get the ruminant out. Other than that, I don't know what the preference is for.
Does establishing a prey haven help at all? A lot of Fiji villages, what they'll do is they'll just set off one small patch of their reef where nobody can fish. And as a result, the fish populations go way up because the juveniles and that sort of thing aren't killed.
Yeah, the problem is, the problem here is, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of tragedy of the commons. There's no enforcement of anything in any way except other than maybe like, trying to start a riot in the city. So you can say, for instance, this is a national park, you can't hunt here, but it doesn't matter. And the people that have guns in this country are the military and important people. So, for instance, one of the villages I work in, there's a military outpost, and they're in charge of enforcing the law. But they're the only people that have guns, and there's a pretty good amount of shotgun hunting that goes on there, and they eat monkeys. So, who watches the watchers,
Yeah, I mean, with the reef, you can see if somebody's fishing in front of your village.
Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, this is, like I said, the topography is really difficult, and the forest is really dense. The issue with primates, we're trying to focus on primates specifically because their recruitment is pretty slow. They don't have a lot of offspring. So we're trying to focus on those because they're going to be the first things to go if something does go. And like let people continue to trap, continue to trap your rats and your dikers and all those things, but don't kill all your monkeys.
The noise component of your data, how do you remove that? Do you do some kind of progressive fitting or something?
Yeah, I sort of glanced over it, but it's a low S, it's a package MR. It's locally weighted regression, so it takes a section, 6-month section, and then does a regression line through that 6-month section, then moves to the next month, 6-month section. And so.
But you don't care about the characteristics of the noise itself. You don't care about.
I do care, but I'm just reporting on the long-term trend here. What I've talked to Steve in the past is trying to pull out that seasonality signal. So we break it down into 3 things: the long-term, the seasonality, and the error. Right? And so what I've just reported in those slopes was just the long-term slope. What I'm interested in subsequently is pulling out the seasonality for potentially doing things like a hunting season, or don't hunt in this area in this region. There is evidence for it and stuff that we've looked at. there is evidence for, but it's still in its infancy. And it's difficult to pull out as well.
We should chat after this is over.
Okay.
Be pretty interested in thinking about this.
I have a question. When it comes to analyzing the human genes, which is a huge amount of data and long, to what extent do the same current technologies meet the requirements of or capability of doing those? Maybe now or down the road, couple of years.
For analyzing a human genome?
Right.
Well, there are a bunch of tools, and it depends on what the specific question that you're asking. So are we looking for gene similarity between a human being and a different organism? So that would be like gene homology. There are tools available for doing that. The nice thing about the human genome is that we have a reference genome, so that we already know the structure and that we can do direct comparisons of different parts of that genome. For other organisms, though, when we don't have a reference, it's much more difficult because we don't know which part of a given DNA fragment belongs to which part of the genome. There's a lot of ongoing work, and it's very tedious work to get reference genomes. And the ultimate goal is to have a reference genome for all organisms. The human genome, that was completed around 2000, I believe.
If there are no other questions for the panel, let's thank them for 3